Welcome to this video from Mommy and Darcy.
As I was editing that intro with Darcy, I realized how blurry it was. Sometimes when Darcy is in the shot, she'll be moving around a lot and the camera will just forget to refocus. And so that's what ended up happening. So gonna give you a quick overview of what I was saying in that introduction. But basically, John and I have talked about this before. Originally, when we became licensed to be foster parents, we set our ages from 5 to 10. And so there were a lot of resources that we had added to, like, you know, kind of a wish list that were kids' books, things that we had stumbled upon, and, you know, everybody was talking about them. But if you've been following us for a while, you know that our first two placements have been teenage girls. And so these kids' books really haven't served us well because they were not meant for the demographic of teen. But now Darcy has become a lot more aware of us being a foster family and what that means. And so we thought it would make sense to go ahead and pick up some of these books, help Darcy better understand the situation, and also help all of you, because if we can go ahead and check out all of these books, tell you a little bit about them, maybe that'll help you all make decisions on what book best fits for your family. So this is going to be a pretty thorough book review, probably one of the longest videos I've ever done, but hang with me because this content is really, really valuable. We are going through really popular and well-known foster care books, and also some new ones that have just hit. And I created a grading scale, and this is totally subjective, definitely just my opinion, and I am one person, so keep that in mind as you're watching this. But what I talk about is I go through and I grade the illustration, which seems kind of unimportant, but I think it's pretty darn important when you're talking about kids' books. You want the illustrations to be engaging, to really tell the story of the words on the page. Wanted to make sure that's included in kind of a subcategory to illustration is the diversity that's represented in the book. I think that's really important, that when you're reading books and you're bringing things into your home, that they can be reflective of really what your family could look like. Then I give an overall score, which I call readability. So this is just, is it a good story? Is it easy to read? Is it age appropriate? So that's kind of like an overall grading category. And then I also talk about how it relates to foster care. So one is the appropriateness, and two is the relatability. So is this relatable to foster families, to kids who are in care? So that really is a pretty important category to cover. And of course, Darcy is gonna weigh in. She is really excited to be having all of these books. Of course, she loves being on camera for you guys. And it actually worked out that I had to reshoot this because we actually got a book sent to us by an author. And this is a new book. And so Darcy and I are actually gonna quickly review this. She's on her way home right now. So her and I are gonna go ahead and read this one more time. We've read it before. It's an amazing story. Spoiler alert, it's a good it's a good book. But we'll go through and we'll tell you about this book, and then we'll jump into all of the others. And I also just want to mention that just due to the nature of these kids books, they are foster care kids books. Some of them do deal with trauma, so I just want to put that out there as kind of a trigger warning. If there are certain things talking and mentioning abuse, if that's a trigger for you, this might not be the video for you, or maybe have somebody else watch it and screen it for you.
I love this book, and it was about different moms. It's also about care.
Taking care of each other?
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna lie, when I was originally picking out books to review for this video, this one popped up and I really wanted to add it to the list, but I already had gotten a few too many books. And since this one isn't specific to foster care, I just kind of didn't make the first list. But then the author reached out and she wanted to send me a copy, and I was like, this is perfect because I really wanted to check this book out. This book is amazing. So I'll go through the criteria. Illustration wise, this is by far a 5 out of 5, hands down, including diversity. Not only does it have really beautiful illustrations, I'll show you a couple of these. So the style is absolutely adorable, really great colors. But the diversity in here is incredible, from different ages of moms to those kids who have disabilities, different ethnicities represented, And even a mom with a sleeve tattoo, which I truly appreciate. Readability, again, I give it a 5 out of 5. I'm not trying to be biased, but just every single page is well written. There are different affirmations on each page that are highlighted in bold, and it just mentions like powerful, strong, kind, respectful, creative, really great affirmations and characteristics that all of us parents want to instill in our kids. For foster care appropriateness, I would give this a 4 out of 5. While it's not directly related to foster care, it does do a really great job of representing what different families are gonna look like, what different moms look like. You do wanna be mindful though, if you have a kid who's in your care who does have a biological mom who is, you know, reaching reunification, like that's the goal. You just wanna be mindful of not like overstepping that like mom boundary. So let the kid guide if they're going to refer to you as mom. Don't push this on them. And I guess I would give it the same grade for, I think it was appropriateness and relatability. I would say a 4 out of 5 because especially if you're adopting out of foster care, this would definitely be something that I would pick up. Maybe even a gift that you could give someone who is going through that process of adoption through foster care or adoption in general. This is just a really, really cute book. What I also like about this is there are different ways to personalize the book. So you can add in like the favorite food, you can add in the kid's name, and at the end, there's a special section where they get a chance to draw their beautiful family. So they leave that open. So, all right, let's check out the other books. Actually, we already checked out the other books, but now they're gonna watch it. All right, so we just finished Murphy's 3 Homes. This is specifically a story for children in foster care, and that's very clear when you read it. This book kind of goes over that concept of kids who are in foster care moving from home to home and internalizing that it's their fault. Darcy's clearly tired after reading the book.
No, I'm not.
You're not? Okay.
And some I.
Some kids might act out with certain behaviors. There's part of the story where the dog runs away. So this is really a book targeted towards kids who have been in care and might have been displaced a couple of times. I think this is one of the older books. It looks like it's from, well, it's from 2009, so not too terribly old. I would say illustration-wise, I would give it like a 3. It's not bad, but it's not great. And also kind of a subcategory with illustrations is diversity, because I do want to address that. So here the main character is a dog. There's probably minimal diversity that's shown in here. What do you think of the book?
I love it.
You love it? You like the story? As far as readability, I think I would also give it a 3. It had a lot of text on each page. It was a longer story. I felt like for the age group that it's targeting, it might have done better to be like a little bit shorter, but not a bad story. It had a good plot. It followed the whole story really well. As for foster care appropriateness, I would say I would be cautious to read this to a child who is in your care. I think that it definitely is appropriate and relatable for kids who have been displaced before or might be experiencing some grief and loss from moving around. But I don't think that the concepts are really clear all that much. So it definitely is like a higher level of being relatable to foster care itself. What I do like, and you'll see this in some of these books, I think it's a really great add-on, is at the end it says note to caregivers. And what this does is it helps the caregiver or the adult who's reading this to the child, gives them tools for conversation, identifying feelings and beliefs, talking about guilt, confusion, grief, and loss. So it does give the adults some tools as they share this with the kid. All right, next up is a book called Foster Care, One Dog's Story of Change. And we're going to follow this up after Murphy's 3 Homes because, again, it has a dog who is placed into foster care and it follows his experience. This book also has in the back tips for foster parents and caregivers. It talks about co-parenting, accepting differences, significant items matter to kids when they're placed in care.
I'm going to join this, but not where you write it.
Okay. So this book follows this dog whose name is Foster. I think that it has kind of a corny joke throughout it because it's called foster care, and there's other kids who have been in foster care. So the joke just kind of, I don't know, it doesn't land very well, but I don't think it's detrimental to the story. Foster, the dog, is placed in Miss Beulah's home. And what I like about this book is that each of the kids has a different experience in foster care. So what this does is it makes it pretty relatable because each of the kids has gone through something different that has resulted in them being in foster care. So you have one child who has lost their parents, so permanency is an option. There's also, they explain that one of the kids' moms is, I think they call it like she likes to go out, so she likes to party. I think that that's kind of showing the side of like, you know, maybe if alcohol or substance abuse is the reason why a child is placed into care. It gives the side of reunification because it shares that the parents are working to get their kids back. So I do like that. And it also just shows how Foster the dog is working to build a relationship with Miss Beulah, because at first he really didn't, you know, feel like he wanted to trust her, trust his care team, and slowly it shows that he can trust them.
Yep, he can trust them.
So this book is a little bit more recent. It's from 2018. I would say illustration-wise, I would give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that it's pretty current. I also would say readability-wise, I would also give it a 4 or a 5, really, because I think that the story is really easy to follow. It's the right length. It's appropriate for the age that it's targeting. There's not too many words on each page, and I think that that's important to keep the kids interested as you're flipping through. For foster care relatability and appropriateness, I would also give this, honestly, probably a 5, because I think that it does a really good job covering a lot of concepts. It does it pretty explicitly, and I didn't mention with illustration, but diversity doesn't really play a part in here just because it's all animals, but they do have a diverse group of animals, so you can interpret that the way that you would want to. Did you like the book?
Yeah, but this score is like mad and sad.
Yep, they're mad and sad.
Yeah, and sometimes she didn't get her teacher and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so what Darcy's describing is the different emotions.
He watched his giraffe.
Oh yeah.
And she found the giraffe.
She was talking about Foster, the dog, losing his giraffe when he was displaced from his home. He didn't take with him his giraffe. And so one of the important things that they talk about in here is that, you know, personal belongings matter. And so the foster parent ended up finding it for him. Yeah. Sorry, I should probably say that there are spoilers in this. So if you don't want to know... Spoiler warning! We might tell a little bit too much about the stories, but just enough for you to make the decision of if it's right for you. And again, the fact that at the end of this it has tips for foster parents and educators, I think that that's really, really key with these books.
Yep.
All right, so next up we're going to talk about No Matter What, a foster care tale. This is one that we actually read yesterday. It's a very, very new book. It's only in hardback right now. This is actually written by Josh Shipp. He actually was in foster care, and so he is writing about his experiences. Darcy, how'd you like this book?
He didn't have any family, so he went to
a bunch of families, didn't he?
Yeah, these and
you don't have to tell the whole story, but did you like it?
Yeah, and he went to the webboard, and he didn't like the dog.
Yeah, he didn't like the dark. So this one, it says that it's a foster care tale. It does share where the squirrel who is like in foster care is going to many different homes. But I will say this is more of an adoption tale because what they're looking for is permanency for the squirrel. And in this story, the bird is kind of a symbol for a caseworker trying to find the perfect home for the squirrel. And they try a bunch of different animals. There's always a reason why it's not a good fit. And over time, the squirrel starts to internalize that,
What does internalized mean?
It means he thinks it's his fault.
Oh.
So he thinks that it's his fault, similar to the book with Murphy, the dog, that it's his fault that he can't find a permanent home. So what he starts to do is act out with different behaviors, and they talk about like breaking the family before the family decides to kick the kid out. It's kind of giving the power back to the kid when they act that way. It's going to be up to me why I end up leaving. I'm not going to wait until it's their fault. So that's a pretty common concept. I think a lot of these books have that kind of weaved into some of the stories because it does happen with kids. And ultimately, the squirrel does find an animal family who keeps the squirrel no matter what, which is the name of the book. So as for grading, I would say illustration, this is just kind of like style. I would say this is probably a 4 or 5. Really beautiful illustrations here. Again, for diversity, because it's animals, I don't know if I can really speak to that, but they do show a diverse group of animals. So I think that that was intentional. For the overall readability, again, I would give it a 4 or 5. The story, the characters, the plot, all really enjoyable. Darcy really liked it.
Yep, I did.
So for foster care, relatability and appropriateness, I would say this is probably, I would give it 4 out of 5 stars, just because they show quite a bit of displacement for this child. I feel like it's a little bit uncommon to have as many attempts at matching. I think that there are cases where that might happen, but it's not the norm. And again, I think that for it to say that it's a foster care tale and permanency was really adoption, I kind of would put this more in the adoption category. So if you have a child with you who is looking for their forever home, I think that this would be a really good book. But for foster care specifically, as far as the different options and the different experiences that happen, it doesn't cover a whole lot of those. Next, we have a book that isn't specific.
And it says The Invisible String.
That's right, The Invisible String. So this isn't specifically a book about foster care or adoption, but it does talk about a concept that I think is really relatable to most kids who are in foster care. So this book follows a mom and her 2 kids, and it starts off really just talking about how the kids are scared at night and they want to be close to their mom. And she talks about this invisible string that connects them, no matter where they are, no matter what they're going through. And then the kids are basically testing the theory and saying, well, does it apply to my friends? You know, do I have an invisible string with my friends? And she said, yes. What if I'm in a different country? What if I'm a mountain climber? All these different scenarios. And the mom...
Everywhere you go, that invisible string.
Yeah, the invisible string connects you.
Yes, it does.
And while at the end it doesn't have a specific, like, you know, for caregivers, it does have a word from the author, and she talks about here that there are so many different situations where this book has come in handy for people. So when it comes to bereavement groups, when kids have lost their parents or a family member, that this book has helped them. It helps with hospitals, camp counselors, adoption and foster organization, divorce, when families end up splitting up, when a parent goes to prison. There are just many different situations where this book could apply. And honestly, this could help Darcy just by herself because, you know, right now she likes to sleep with her light on. She gets scared sometimes, and this concept helps her. But then it's also going to be applicable and relatable to a kid who's in foster care, who's younger and missing their parents for whatever reason they've been separated. So that's the general overview of the book. So illustration wise, I would give this a 5, and I know that this is personal preference, but I love the colors, the style. I think it's a beautifully done book. So even on the topic of diversity, even though it follows a white family, there is a lot of diverse representation. Kids in a wheelchair, her friend is a person of color, I do love when books kind of switch up gender roles. So instead of having the boy be the mountain climber, they have the girl, and then the boy is dancing in France. I love when they switch that up. It just helps reinforce things with young kids that they can be whoever they want. Overall readability, again, I would give this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's just a beautiful story. It does a really good job explaining concepts. For foster care, appropriateness, and relatability, I would probably give it a 4 out of 5. I think that this is a concept that most kids are going to experience when they come and stay with you. There's going to be some sort of loss, some sort of grief, some distance that they feel with a loved one. And so I do think that this is a great book to have on hand if you're fostering younger kids. Did you like it?
Yeah, and in that pink heart, it's so beautiful.
It's a beautiful heart.
Yeah.
Darcy likes books in general. I'm going to be shocked if she says she doesn't like one of these books. What is it called?
I have right here.
I Love You From Right Here.
I love you from
This book was actually given to us by a viewer. So this book is from Emily Fountain. Thank you so, so much, Emily. She says, I saw this book on TikTok and thought it could be useful if you ever have a younger child in care. Thank you, Emily. This book is Love You From Right Here. This is the second edition, so it's from 2018, and it's a keepsake book for children in foster care. And the reason why it's a keepsake book is at the end, there's an opportunity to share a picture that they can keep and some of the things that they liked to do while they stayed with you. Darcy, what did you think about this book?
I think about that they love each other everywhere.
Yeah.
And they play with, and they always play with each other while they eat everywhere they stay. And I love it so much. It's just the perfect time for me.
It's a really, really good book. The concept of this book, kind of like the main message, is that no matter what the child is feeling, experiencing, that the caregiver is going to be there for them no matter what. And I will say I kind of teared up at this page because it says, and if you're over there, I'll still love you from right here. And it's the child returning home. So probably a little too soon for me to be reading books that accurately show reunification, just because it's still pretty raw. So I would say illustration wise, I would give this, I would say like 3 out of 5 stars. I think it's decent illustration. It does a really good job with diversity and showing different kids, different caregivers. So I'd give it like a 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
As for the overall readability, I would give it probably 5 out of 5 stars. I think it is just a really great message. It's short and sweet. It's to the point. It does a really good job articulating its message. For foster care, appropriateness, and relatability, I would give it a 4 out of 5. It doesn't explicitly talk about things, but it doesn't necessarily have to. It's a book that, you know, kind of shows it. So like it shows the child being dropped off by the caseworker. It shows them, you know, leaving the home. And so because it has the part at the end that's the keepsake.
Part at the end?
I would say 4 out of 5. Thank you so much, Emily, for giving this to us. This will definitely come in handy. Thank you so much.
I said go. But no feet.
All right, so next up is a book called A Terrible Thing Happened. This is one that I picked up a little while ago. It's from 2000, and it's for ages 4 to 8. Darcy's going to talk about this book.
And so this is a bad dream, and he talked to Miss Mabel about the bad things they were playing while they were talking about the bad things, and he was drawing the picture about this terrible bad thing happened.
Yeah, so this is a book really about trauma and secondary trauma that kids might witness. And his name is Sherman, and it just kind of talks about...
his name is Sherman.
And just kind of the emotions that they might feel, the experiences that they might go through. It kind of talks about how he has bad dreams, his stomach hurts, his head hurts. So what's really cool about this book is that it shares how Sherman ends up talking to someone. They do like picture therapy where he's drawing pictures of how he feels, what he's experiencing. And ultimately he talks about the terrible thing that happened, and she helps him process that. So I would say illustration wise, I would give this probably like a 3. It is from 2000, so the style is a little different, a little dated.
It's
and
a little dated.
And because it's animals, I can't really speak to the diversity that's represented, but I think that illustrators do that on purpose so that diversity can, you know, kind of be covered just by showing different animals.
Yep.
As far as readability, the fact that it's talking about such heavy topics, I think it does a really good job. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars for the readability, just because it does a really good job talking about a concept that's really hard for kids to wrap their head around. As for foster care relatability and appropriateness, I would again give this a 4 out of 5 stars, maybe even a 5 out of 5 stars, because I think that with most kids, they're going to experience some level of trauma. There might be some thing that happened in their past that would be relatable to them, help them process. Again, this is for ages 4 to 8, so keep that in mind. But I do think that this is a really great book to have on hand, just because you're not necessarily going to know if a kid is coming to you who may or may not have experienced something like this. Maybe it's not going to be shared with you, and just by reading the book, it comes out. And I think with most of these books, especially this one, just be aware of any like triggers, make sure you're watching the kid and how they're reacting to it. Maybe even consult with caseworkers depending on the situation before you start digging into certain topics. So next up is Maybe Days, a book for children in foster care. This says that the ages are 4 to 10. 2 pages into it, Darcy said, "This is boring."
This is boring.
So I'll go ahead and grade it, and it'll kind of explain kind of what this book is about. So as for illustration, I'm going to give this 2 stars, mainly because it does a good job with diversity, but it's just pretty flat images. Again, it's just the style. Readability, I would give it probably a 1. It's very dry. It's not a plot with characters. It just kind of talks about the situation of kids being in care. So with that being said, even though the illustration and the readability is a low score, for foster care appropriateness and relatability, I would give this a 4 out of 5. Even though it's a dry book, it does cover a lot of really good information. So if you're trying to kind of explain what foster care is, again, the ages are 4 to 10, so probably around 6 to 10 is what I would say is an appropriate age. I think that this would be a good way of explaining, you know, the situation of foster care. All right, so this one is Monty's Day in Court. It's what to expect when you have to testify in court. It's a very, very specific book. Yeah, you want to tell them about it? Did you like the book?
Yeah. It was so boring.
So because this is a really specific book for Darcy, she really didn't find it all that interesting. I do think this is a good book to have on hand, or at least know about, so that if you have a child who is going through something where they would have to go to court, it does explain some things. It's very specific about what happened to the child and who the perpetrator was, and so for that reason, I don't know if it would be really applicable to a lot of situations. It's just applicable really towards a parent who is abusing a child. It doesn't talk about whether it's physical or sexual abuse, but it is specific about abuse and the parent going to jail and the child having to testify. Outside of that very specific situation, there's not a whole lot that can be relatable for the kid, but again, I think that it does do a good job of explaining the courtroom as well as who would be involved. So for illustration, I would say I would just give it a 2. Diversity is a little low, I would say. Readability is also probably a 1 or a 2. It's very dry, very specific, but it does at least have characters and a plot. For foster care appropriateness and relatability, I would give it about a 3. Again, if it's not the exact same situation that your kid is going through, it might be challenging for a kid to really find this relatable. And last but not least, I'm going to talk to you about this book, which I'm going to call an honorable mention. So this is I Said No, a kid-to-kid guide to keeping private parts private. So this was probably one of the very first books that we bought, and specifically it was for Darcy. As foster parents, you're kind of conditioned and you have this stigma associated with kids who are in foster care. So there's this underlying like fear in the back of your mind as a parent, if you already have kids in your home, that there's a chance that if there are kids who are coming into your home who have experienced trauma, who have experienced sexual abuse or physical abuse or any of these things, they might act out in that same way. And so, you know, to be honest, when we first started off, it was a big concern of ours. And Darcy was like 2 or 3 years old. So we wanted to be prepared. We wanted to teach her at a young age, you know, what's appropriate and with whom, you know, whether it's your parents, whether it's doctors, who you can talk to if there is inappropriate behavior that's happening. And so this is a book I just wanted to give an honorable mention for any foster parents who are going through the process, who have young kids in the home. This is a good one to have on hand. I think it's good for any kids, honestly, because inappropriate behavior can happen really anywhere, and it's most often going to be with a family member, close friend. It could happen at a friend's house, that sort of thing. So definitely would recommend this book. And of course, I also want to mention that all because a kid is in foster care does not mean that they are a perpetrator. Even if they experience things where they were the victim, it does not mean that they will act out with that same behavior. All right, so that is all the books that we have. These books I'm going to link below if you're interested in purchasing any of them. All of them are available on Amazon. They average about $10 a book, so really affordable. I hope that this video has helped you guys decide which books to start off with, which books are going to come in handy for kids who are going to stay with you. If you like this video, you'll be able to check back later in case you get a foster placement and you forget which books might help them.
Thank you for looking at our book video. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Don't forget, have fun with your books at your house. Thanks for watching. See you next time.